everyone. Welcome to today's lesson. Today I'm going to be taking you through health and safety management, safety practices and principles. We're going to be talking about personal protective equipment. So what is PPE? PPE basically is equipment that is used to protect employees from personal injury and illnesses. Basically, the kind of harm that can only occur to a person. So we have this equipment which is specialized to protecting such individuals who are exposed to such harm from them getting that harm or that illness. And PPE is also used as a last option. And the other thing is that PPE doesn't eliminate the hazard. You will still be exposed to the danger, but the danger will still be prevailing, but you will be protected from the health risks. And as such, it's also important to make sure that successful use of PPE relies on good user training, availability of the right equipment for the right hazards, and good supervision and enforcement in the form of supervision. So the last resort rule, or the last option rule, this rule applies especially when you are dealing with a type of PPE known as RPE. And RPE basically stands for respiratory protective equipment. It's a type of PPE that is used to protect employees against hazards that target the respiratory system. So there are certain conditions in which the last resort rule can apply or do apply. Number one, during maintenance, where you find you have to go down or go up something, maybe go down a drain and fix a pipe, fix a service line, an electric power cable, a pipe, a pipeline or just you need to do something at that particular point in time, but you don't have the time and the luxury to say eliminate or engineer. You need to do it quickly, so you might be forced to use PPE to send people right into the danger, and they have to go do the maintenance while it's in the danger but protected using PPE. As a result of a new assessment, perhaps after introducing a new substance or machinery. Maybe you've bought a new substance, maybe you've introduced new chemicals or a new material in the workplace that is different from the material that we've been using to do your work. And as such, that material would then come, or rather, then comes with its own with its own what you call this with its own dangers, which means it would have introduced new dangers, or it's a new machinery. So you might need to give people PPE against that. Also, during emergency situations, for example, maybe during a plant shutdown or a plant breakdown or an outbreak of fire, when there's a fire, you might need there might be a need to use PPE in such situations, like what we always see, even in movies, where these guys, these firefighting guys, they always use this, suits and axes and helmets and fire extinguishers to get into buildings with fire to rescue people during a fire outbreak. That's kind of the situation. And also, you use PPE where alternatives are not feasible. What are the alternatives? The alternatives are the other control measures from the hierarchy of control measures. Remember, the hierarchy of control measures has, firstly, it has elimination, where you remove the source of the hazard completely. It has substitution, where you remove the more dangerous substance or the more dangerous material and replace it with another material, an alternative which has the same function but has less the danger to it. You've substituted. And then we have engineering controls. This is where you alter, you change, physically change the environment, the work environment, be it the equipment itself, be it a part or a component within the equipment, to try to reduce the hazard or the danger that comes with that machine or that comes with that substance. That's in engineering control. You physically alter the environment to reduce the hazard or the risk associated with the hazard. And then we have administrative controls. This is where you use administrative means. You use rules and regulations, training, supervision, compliance monitoring, putting up of signs and labels, and many others, job rotation, those sort of things. So where you can't use these other alternatives, that's when you use PPE. That's why it's called the last resort rule, where you cannot, where you don't have any other thing to resort to, but they accept PPE, so you then resort to PPE. So with that being said, we now move on to the basic standards of PPE. What should PPE or be like? Number one, it should fit well. It should fit those who are putting on it well. It should be comfortable to wear and not interfere with other equipment. This is in case where you are using more than one type of PPE to to protect yourself. Maybe you are using, argument's sake, you are using, for example, maybe you are using a respirator, a respirator together with maybe some earmuffs and some goggles. So the goggles, the earmuffs, and the respirator, as you are using them simultaneously at the same time, none of each of those equipment, you should wear them in such a way and make sure that when they are worn, they won't interfere with each other's functions, or otherwise they become hazardous. Training is important. It's key when it comes to PPE use, and also correct use of PPE is also essential, and supervision also is also essential. And it shouldn't just be supervision; it should be supervision coupled with disciplinary procedures. And you should also avail or make sure that PPE that is needed in the workplace is always available to visitors and to all the workers in the areas which they need to use that PPE to protect themselves. And it's also important that anybody who enters the prescribed area wears the specified PPE for that. And then we have requirements of PPE. Those are standards. So these are the requirements. A standard would kind of be what is expected, or what should PPE be like, right? So if we go to the dictionary, in the dictionary they end, look up what a standard is and say search. So there it is. Right? A standard is a basis for comparison, a reference point against which other things can be evaluated. So the standards of PPE, basically, these are what we are saying PPE should be like. This is what we expect PPE to be like. But what about a requirement, right? Principal requirement. Let's go to the dictionary and look up requirements, right? What are requirements? The requirements is basically something that is needed, something that you need to show up, or that is required in advance, right? Something that is required in advance. What is it that the essentials, the demands, the necessities, or prerequisites? That's what a requirement is. So this is what we require PPE to be like. This is what we need PPE. These are the prerequisites of PPE. What should PPE be like? The standards is what we expect PPE to be. This is what we need PPE to be. So PPE should be suitable for the wearer and the task. It should be compatible, and it should also be effective in terms of where maybe you are using multiple PPEs. Like I was giving an example earlier of a goggles, respirator, and earmuffs. a risk assessment should be conducted, which is also suitable. And from that risk assessment, remember, the risk assessment identifies the hazards that are prevailing in the workplace. And from the hazards, you are also able to identify the risks that come from the prevailing hazards. And as such, you then have a basis or a platform with which you can then inform your control measures effectively, and say, if I'm gonna need PPE, I'm definitely going to need this type of PPE. Why and how? Because the risk assessment told you the hazard that is there and the risks that comes with the hazard. So you then can decide adequately which kind of PPE should be used. So suitable risk assessment should be done. A suitable maintenance program for the PPE should be done. Remember, there are different types of PPE, like I mentioned earlier. Some of them are simple and easy, like respirators. Some of them are complicated, like scuba equipment, respiratory PPE. They might need specialized training, and then they might have parts that need to be oiled, that need to be, you need to dust them off and oil them. Then they might have parts that you need to open up and check what's inside. So you need to, for those PPE that need maintenance. Well, most PPE, in fact, if not all PPE, should be maintained. This might include basic things like cleaning that PPE, disinfecting that PPE, and storing it properly in proper cases and things like that. Including going to other complicated tasks. So you should come up with the safety officer should come up with a suitable program PPE, suitable maintenance program for PPE rather, and you should store the PPE in suitable storage. If these are goggles, store them in their cases and store them in a cupboard under lock and key. If these are eye shields, store them in their cases. Just like spectacles they have a case. If this is a respirator, every time you use the respirator, it should be cleaned properly, because it can have fungus. It can have even dust. So it should be cleaned and put in the case and stored in the cupboard properly. Information, instruction, and training on good use of PPE and coupled with demonstrations should be properly conducted. The safety officer or the person responsible should demonstrate how each and every PPE should be used. And they should make sure that when employee are introduced to PPE, you do a TNA, you do a training needs analysis to determine whether you need to train them on that PPE. If the answer is yes, then the appropriate, adequate training should be conducted, and they should be evaluated in that training to see if it worked. And then from there, you should make sure that you have good user instruction and demonstrations and supervisions, right, of PPE, and have an effective reporting system for what? For reporting defects in PPE, PPE that is faulty, PPE that is getting old, that sort of thing, PPE that is getting old, that sort of thing. Make sure that such PPE is there's an effective reporting system for that. So we have types of PPE. So the other important thing that you need to know is that generally speaking, footwear, things that we put on our feet, shoes, and hearing protectors and hard hats are not mainly concerned with protection from hazardous substances. This is just things that we use generally in the workplace as general PPE. But then we have specialized or specific PPE, right? But this is not to negate, or this is not to say that they are not PPE. They are a type of PPE, but generally speaking, these are not primarily concerned with protecting individuals from specific hazards, or so to speak. Because you can use them generally for so many things. I mean, it's footwear. If you're gonna walk inside a site, it's obvious you're gonna put on something appropriate for such an environment. So we have respiratory protection equipment, rather respiratory protective personal equipment. We have hand and skin protection. We have eye protection, PPE. We have protective clothing. So we have areas of protection. We have the eyes, the head, the respiratory system, the hand and the arms, the feet and the legs and the whole body. So we have the hazards that are likely to affect those areas. We have the hazards that are likely to affect the areas mentioned, right? The areas mentioned. So we have chemical hazards, metal splashes, dust, projectiles. Projectiles are basically things that are coming at, they've been projected. These are pieces that are coming off of something and they're coming towards your eyes, towards your eyes with high speed. Things that can, pierce you. We have gases, we have vapors, we have radiation. What do you use to protect your eyes? Safety spectacles, goggles, face shields, face visors, including those that are used in welding. So we have the head area. Hazards, we have impact from falling or flying objects, things that can hit you from above, from the side, or even things that can bump into your head, even things that can entangle your hair, your hair, right? What we use bump caps and a range of helmets. Basically, that's it. Respiratory system, we have dusts or vapors, gases, oxygen deficient atmospheres, basically where you get in an environment where the air is thin. The air is thin. You have very thin air that you can't breathe properly. What do we use? We use disposable filtering face masks. These are what people, these are what people call dust masks, right? We have respirators, we have half and full respirators, we have air-fed helmets, breathing apparatus, and the like. We have hand and arms. What are the hazards? Abrasions, temperature, extremes, either hot temperatures, very hot temperatures, or very cold temperatures, on your skin or in the hand and the arms. We have cuts, punctures, impacts, chemicals, electric shock, skin infection, disease, or contamination. What do we use? Gauntlets, we use mitts, we use wrist cuffs, armlets, and gloves, right? And there are different types of gloves. There are different kinds of gloves, right? So, different kinds of gloves. And feet and legs. We have basically under feet and legs, we have wet conditions, where you can slipping, electrostatic buildup, because this thing can be a source of ignition, electrostatic buildup. Fires can start because of this thing, or explosions. Cuts and punctures in the feet or the legs where you are punctured by maybe something sharp, falling objects, things that fall onto your legs or fall onto your feet. Metal and chemical splashes and abrasions. What do we use? Safety boots, shoes with steel toe cap. These are boots, safety boots which have a metal cap at the end to protect the toes in case something falls on your feet. And penetrative resistant midsoles, safety boots which have a plate in the midsole, so that maybe when you step on a nail or something, it won't go through into the sole of the shoe and even into your feet. We have gaiters, leggings, and spats. Whole body, basically, we use conventional overalls and disposable overalls, and specialist protective clothing, like what they're using right now for COVID-19. Where you see these guys with COVID for COVID-19 health response teams, where they are in the ICU and they're putting on these white garments and face visors, and that's an example of a disposable overall. And what does it protect against? Extreme temperatures, adverse weather, chemical splashes, pressure leaks, impact and penetrative contaminated dust, excessive wear, entanglement of clothing, and the like, right? So we have respiratory protective equipment. It's used to basically protect people from dust, gases, fumes, mists, and microorganisms. That's why we are using masks, guys. This is COVID-19. That's why we're using masks. But remember, masks, like for COVID, they're just there as a mechanical as a mechanical defense, not as a chemical one, as a mechanical one. That which means they physically filter parts or particles that are large enough not to pass through the pores of the mask, but those that are much smaller than enough, they have a high probability that they can pass. So you can still get COVID when you are putting on a mask if the dose is too much. So RPE, right? It can be subdivided basically into two. We have RPEs, basically we have under RPE we have respirators and we have breathing apparatuses. So what are respirators? Respirators basically they filter and clean the air as you breathe it mechanically. Like I was saying, example is a mask like these COVID-19 masks, the K9 mask, right? A breathing apparatus is one which supplies you with air that you can breathe, clean, oxygen-rich air, right? The respirator doesn't supply air. It depends on you to breathe. But as you breathe, it filters dirty air and makes sure that when the air reaches your nose, it's clean enough and safe enough for you. The breathing apparatus has a constant supply of breathable air. That's the difference. So we have a filtering half mask or disposable respirator. It's made of a filtering material. It covers the nose and the mouth and removes respirable dust particles. So that's, like I said, others call it a dust mask, right? Others call it a dust mask. So we have a half mask respirator. It's made up of rubber. I'm sure you are familiar with this one, and it has two round cartridges on the sides, on the left and on the right. There are two round cartridges, and you can open this up, and inside there's a filter material, right? So air is drawn as you breathe. You draw air through a replaceable filter material in that thing. We have a full face mask respirator. It's similar to a half mask, but the difference is this one covers the eyes with a visor. So your whole face is covered with a visor. And the visor will be connected, basically to be designed in such a way that it's connected to the mask. We have a powered respirator. This one basically has an operated fan which has a battery, and it sucks air and drives it through an active filter, right? And then that air from the filter goes through a pipe, right? From a pipe, it's then fed into the helmet or the visor, where you can then breathe it, or the user can then breathe it, right? So we have we were talking about respirators. Now we are talking about breathing apparatuses, right? So breathing apparatuses basically are into three forms. We have self-contained breathing apparatus. This is basically what you see scuba divers use. And the word scuba is an acronym. It stands for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. It's a type of a breathing apparatus that falls under self-contained breathing apparatuses. So you like those guys who dive in the ocean, right? You have a gas cylinder with compressed air in there, and then you have meters and pipes and hoses, and you hook it up, you balance your air, and you can calculate, and I have this much worth of hours or this much worth of air, which means I can take so long underwater breathing this air, right? Then we have a fresh air hose apparatus. This one basically you have fresh air which is delivered through a hose to a mask, or rather a helmet, or a mask that the user puts on, and it's a sealed mask. So this air is fed from an uncontaminated source, right? It's coming from outside. Maybe it's a room, right? They're inside the room. The room has contaminated air. The hose comes from outside, goes through into the room, and this user is in there doing whatever they're doing, and they are supplied with air from outside, which is clean. And then we have a compressed air line apparatus. This one uses a compressor, just from the word compress. It uses a compressor. So the compressor will be sucking air, clean air, and it filters the air, and it delivers the air through a hose. So this system can work on a continuous flow, right? On a continuous flow or on demand. What does that mean? That basically means if it's a continuous flow, what that means is the compressor will be running for the entire time the person will be in there, or the user will be in there working, and it will be pushing air, compressed, not just any air, but compressed air, clean compressed air, which is very critical and very important, that when you use it this way, you make sure that the pressure and the supply of air does not suffocate the user. And then you can have it work on demand. When demand means the compressor will run and supply a certain volume, a certain determined volume of air to the user. Argument's sake, maybe every 50 seconds the compressor runs and supplies a volume of air, because it knows that this volume, or you have calculated that this volume of air will last the user at least for 50 seconds, and after 50 seconds we have to supply another volume of air to prevent what? To prevent suffocation, right? To prevent the user from suffocating. So we have hand and skin protection. The main way of protecting the skin is mainly through gloves and arm shields, right? Arm shields. And another effective way of protecting users, or protecting the skin rather, the user's skin, is through barrier creams. Yes, barrier creams. Barrier creams from the word barrier. Like, so these creams, what do? They create a layer of protection between the skin and the environment, so that when whether it's a chemical or whatever hazard it is, when it comes, it doesn't directly affect the skin, so that the cream interfaces or interacts with this hazard, and thereby protecting the skin. So there are two types of these creams. We have the pre-work creams, right? Pre means before work creams, and then we have after work creams. Before work creams, these are the creams that are designed to provide that layer that I've been talking about, that protects against what? Hazardous substances, right? So that the skin won't get damaged. And then we have after work creams. After work creams, basically, they're there to work as moisteners, right? To replace what? To replace oils, natural oils in the skin, which could have been removed by what? By solvents or by washing. Which solvents? Solvents that come from the pre-work creams, right? So basically, these are like conditioners of the skin, right? You know, like even for ladies, those of you who use shampoos, hair shampoo is basically the soap for hair. It can dry your skin and also your hair. From there, you after washing your hair with shampoo, you apply a conditioner, a hair conditioner. So that's what we are saying. You apply a pre-work cream after work, and working with those chemicals, you wash off that cream, and then you apply the after work creams to replace and rejuvenate your skin. You know. So we have eye protection. It's in three forms. We have spectacles, we have safety glasses, we have goggles. Rather, we have spectacles, goggles, and face visors. So spectacles basically are used for low risk hazards, low speed particles like machine shafts. I think it should be high risk, not low risk. This is a correction. This should be for high risk hazards, right? Even here, it shouldn't be low speed, it should be high speed particles like machine shafts, because these parts, they don't come out of machines very slowly. They come out of machines at high speed. So goggles are best to protect eyes from dust, vapors, solvents. Why? Because they have a tight fit, right? They fit tightly around your eyes, right? They create that tight fit around the eyes. That's why they're best for what? For dust, vapor, because these are gases. You know, these are in gaseous form. These are in a form that can be respirable. You can breathe it in and can pass through small spaces. And then visors, they offer face protection and eye protection. Face and eye protection, right? But they do also, they can steam up, right, in hot, humid environments. They can steam up in hot, humid environments. But they are good for protecting against very bright lights, like the kind that is used for for arc welding, right? That helmet that is used for arc welding, and because they have some of them have special filtering lenses. They can filter UV light, they can filter plasma light, they can filter all this kind of light. So that's eye protection. We have protective clothing. Protective clothing, we're talking about generally clothes that protect you. We have aprons, right? This is clothing. We have boots. It's clothing. We have headgear. It's clothing. So aprons, we have those that are made up of PVC. This is polyvinyl. Yeah. Go Google it. But basically, it's a plastic, right? This plastic can when working with corrosive stuff like acids and things like that, it can protect you when you have spills, right? When you have spills. So it's important that when you select footwear, you involve or you match workplace hazards and the performance requirement of that footwear. This is what we were saying under the requirements of PPE, that you need a suitable risk assessment. That's what will tell you how many or which kind of workplace hazards are there, and then you match those workplace hazards with the required PPE, right? So key issues are of the following. You need to consider the type of the hazard, whether it's physical, it's chemical, or it's thermal. Thermal meaning heat, right? The environment, is it indoors? Are they going to be this hazard? Did you find it indoors or was it outdoors? The ergonomics of the job. Is the job done? Do they do it while standing? Is there constant movement or what? Right? Is there repetitive movement or what? So employer's duties. What is expected of your employer when it comes to PPE? What should he or she or they do? Right? Number one, we expect them to provide you with adequate and suitable and appropriate PPE. Appropriate meaning what? It should be specific. That PPE should be appropriate for the type of hazard that it's supposed to protect you against. It should be suitable, right? Specific to that work environment and specific to the risks and the dangers in there, right? It should be adequate. Simply means it should be of sound construction. It should be quality PPE. That's what makes it adequate and makes it effective. Otherwise, it becomes inadequate. The employer should train you if you don't know how to use that PPE. They should train you on proper use of each and every PPE that they're going to give you. They should also provide an area where you can store all your PPE. Remember, this is personal protective equipment. It's used by individuals, right? So there should be a suitable storage area for all PPE in the workplace. The employer should make sure of that, right? And you should also make sure that whenever you use PPE, you use it as a what? As a last option. As a last option or as a last resort. And whenever you are using PPE, you must make sure that you supervise those that are using that PPE, and you enforce the regulations, the safety and health regulations in the workplace, to make sure that they are abiding by them, they are following the safety protocols that have been put in place. And for those who break the law, who break the regulations that have been set for the health and safety regulations that have been set forth, you must discipline them accordingly. You must discipline them. Why? To set a good example. Otherwise, people will not respect the regulations, which will put them at risk and other workers at risk. Provide appropriate maintenance for all PPE. For those types of PPE that need to be maintained, you need to provide the right maintenance for those PPE, and you also need to keep records, maintain records, and protect those records. This could be issuance, not insurance. Issuance records. Who received which PPE when, and maintenance records of those PPE and many other records that are related to this. You must keep them. These are important, especially when it comes to issues of litigations and issues of compensation or accident investigation or audits. They are called occupational health and safety records. So we have your duties, you as the worker. What about you, the worker? What is it expected of you? What do we expect of you? You must follow the prescribed instructions on the proper use of PPE, right? Use PPE the way it's supposed to be used. Don't take a hard hat and use it like a cap, It's a hard hat. It's an equipment. It's a piece of equipment. It's not a fashion statement. You don't go out there and use PPE, especially protective clothing, and make fashion statements, Cutting overalls and doing whatnot. No, you don't do that. You must make sure that you attend all training. If there's training session and you've been deemed to be or you've been instructed to attend those training sessions, or you're supposed to attend that training, make sure that you attend. Be responsible. Attend that training. And make sure that you tell the right person if you don't have PPE, right? Go to the right person, the relevant people in the organization, and request PPE. Tell them, I don't have PPE. This happens, especially in construction, where maybe some workers are hired, were hired first, and then others are hired at a later point in time. Don't just stay there and assume they'll come to you. Be responsible, because this PPE is meant to protect you. So go there and request it for yourself. And make sure that you sign somewhere in the PPE records, in the issuance records, as proof that you received PPE. And report signs of wear and tear. Report signs of wear and tear on your PPE. Why do we have to say you, the worker, should report? Because remember, you are the worker, right? And this is PPE, it's personal protective equipment. So you are the one who's using it individually on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. So if there's anybody who's going to notice anything that is wearing off or that's tearing off on that PPE, it should be you. So PPE, that's why it's also important to attend what? Training sessions, because during training sessions you'll be trained and told how to deal with wear and tear, right? How to deal with wear and tear. So you see, all these build into each other. The other thing, you must make sure that the PPE that you've been given, it's suitable and it's comfortable for you before you can what? Before you can start working. Otherwise, if it's not suitable and comfortable, report it to your supervisor. How will the worker know that the PPE is not suitable? How will the worker know that the PPE is not comfortable? They would have gone, the assumption is they would have gone through what? Through training. And through training, they would have gained a new knowledge on PPE and anything PPE related. And from that knowledge, then they can use it as a basis, right? To make sure now, to ensure now that their PPE is what is suitable and comfortable before they can start work, right? If it's not, they should report to the supervisor. The supervisor should then take the appropriate action to ensure that the worker has the most suitable and most comfortable PPE for that particular worker. The other duties of the worker. The workers should also ensure that they do not use PPE that they've been told that it's not safe. This PPE is not safe. It's not safe for work or for use when it is been deemed or cleared. That means a competent person has done this clearing and has written it off as what? As not safe for use and work. When that's the situation, don't use that PPE. And the workers must follow the maintenance schedule of the PPE. If it's written in the maintenance program that every 3 weeks or every fortnightly, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, you must maintain this thing, clean it and do this. Follow that. Stick to that. Stickability to the prescription is key. Stickability to the prescription is key. Stick to the prescription, And the workers must not, you see, this is a command. They must not do what? They must not perform dangerous tasks without the right PPE. Don't go in there and, this is where you get those workers who give you statements like, no, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm experiencing this thing. I've been doing this for this long. I'm experiencing this thing. So yeah, just you watch and see, watch and relax. I'll show you how it's done. That kind of mentality is dangerous. Do not perform a dangerous task without appropriate PPE, right? And do not engage in risky behavior, even when put on PPE. You are workers. You are not superheroes. This is not Spider-Man and Batman and Superman, right? That's television, right? And you see Spider-Man putting on his costume and going out there throwing webs, and Batman puts on his mask and with a cape and he flies through the night, jumping off of rooftop buildings. That's not the case here. This is serious. When you're putting on PPE, that does not then give you license to do what risky behavior, because it means you're putting yourself at risk. Remember, I told you that PPE does not eliminate the hazard. That means if you are putting on PPE and you are engaging in risky behavior, the hazard is still there. The hazard is still there, and you are exposing yourself and others to an extra level of risk, right? And properly store all the PPE under lock and key. Why under lock and key? Because some workers, they steal. Some workers steal PPE, especially hardheads. They'll steal them. Like in Botswana here, you see people in the stadiums there, putting on helmets which they have modified and put rollers on top or put center chips. So that's why you have to lock and key. Remember, this thing was bought with money, right? It was bought with money. And regularly clean, lubricate, dust off, align PPE before and after use. Basically, do regular maintenance, right? Do regular maintenance. That's what this means. Regularly maintain your PPE, right? So there's what we call suitability. PPE suitability. How do you assess? How do you know that this PPE is the right PPE for this thing? Right? So to allow the right type of PPE to be chosen, you have to carefully consider the hazards in the workplace. The hazards in the workplace. The hazards in the workplace. That's what you consider. You also have to assess the types of PPE which can protect against those same hazards in the job. And if need be, ask your supplier, because they are the ones supplying you with that PPE. So they should have enough information on what they are selling you. You can't sell something to people that you don't know. That's why we are saying ask the supplier or the shop that you are buying from, for them to give you information, extra technical information on such PPE that you are buying. Right? It's with that information that you are going to use to assess. So these are the following things that you consider. Right? Is the PPE appropriate for the risks involved? Right? Where the exposure of risk may occur. For example, eye protection that is designed against agricultural pesticides will not offer adequate protection against someone using an angle grinder, a stone cutter. That's true, because these ones, the grinder guy is facing the risk of projectiles, pieces getting off. This one is facing the risk of spills, right? Spills and fumes getting into his eyes and irritating his or her eyes. So they're different. So you might use goggles for agricultural pesticides. For here you might use safety glasses, right? Does it prevent or adequately control the risks involved without increasing the overall level of risk? Does the PPE you are giving the worker, does it reduce the risks that you have identified without increasing or bringing an extra level of risk itself? Is the PPE adjustable? And does it fit the wearer correctly? These are the questions that you ask. Has the state of the health of those who involved or wearing the PPE taken into account, especially with respiratory protective equipment? You might have workers who have prevailing health conditions. Maybe they're asthmatic and they put on a mask. You ask them to put on a mask. Maybe some people might have health conditions. Maybe they're claustrophobic. You're asking them to put on a mask and a visor and things like that, and they get in there and they have a shock. These are things that you consider. The state of health of those who are wearing the users who will be using the PPE. What are the needs of the job? What does the job require them? Does it require them to lift heavy things? Does it require them to stay out there with that PPE for a lengthy period of time? What are the requirements for visibility and communication? When they are putting on that PPE, can they communicate effectively? When they say, hey, can the next person hear them? You know? Because it might be that the task will require them to work with other workers in the workplace and ensure that during that task there might be need for communication. And if that PPE takes away the visibility or takes away the communication, the effective communication, then it comes up with an extra level of risk. That PPE has introduced a certain level of risk, so you have to now mitigate that risk. If more than one PPE is being worn, what I was saying earlier on, compatibility. Maybe you are using a respirator and eye protection. Do they disturb each other? Or do they fit in nicely such that the other PPE won't disturb the other one from its function? So training of PPE, you must make sure that, like we said, in the standards, under the standards of PPE, that we said that training is essential, right? So that being said, you must make sure that everyone using PPE, they understand why they need to use it, right? And they know when to use that PPE, and they know how to repair or to replace parts of that PPE, and they understand how far PPE can protect them. So how are you going to make sure that these things workers are acquainted with them? You are going to instill this knowledge through training, right? Through training. So you must train them and instruct them on the proper use of PPE, right? And making this last resort rule a focal point of your training, right? And making them understand, right? The other thing, during training, never allow exemptions for those jobs which just take a few minutes. You know, where maybe they were doing some task, maybe it's a work at height, they were fixing something on a scaffold, you know, and then they realize that something was not fixed properly. If they have to go up, they force them to put on that PPE. It shouldn't be just an issue of saying, no, this is just a 2 minutes job, it doesn't matter. An incident or an accident can occur in that 2 minutes or in those few minutes. It's enough time. Regularly check that PPE and investigate reasons. Regularly check if that PPE is being used properly. If it's not being used properly, investigate why people are not using PPE properly. It might be a lack of knowledge, it might be ignorance, it might be just the issue of saying some workers don't care, some people don't care. Make sure that you have safety signs, right? You have zones. You zone the work site and use signs and put signs, mandatory signs that tell people this in this zone you are mandated to use this PPE and this PPE and this PPE, right? What about maintenance? Make sure that the PPE is well looked after, it's properly stored when it's not being used. And for example, you store it in a dry, clean cupboard. In case of smaller items such as eye protection, you store them in their boxes, in their case. You don't throw them in a box, you know, because they get scratched, and then they have when people put on them, they can't see properly because they're scratched. Keep the PPE must be kept in a clean and in good repair, right? In other words, follow the manufacturer's maintenance schedule, right? The recommended replacement periods. If maybe it's a half mask, maybe it's a respirator. Maybe the manufacturer told you after 3 months you must replace the filter. Replace the filters, the filter material in there. And maybe they said every time you use it, you must clean it. Do that. You know, simple maintenance can be carried out by a trained wearer. That is to say, the users can do simple tasks like cleaning, replacing filter material, you know, washing, dusting off, those kind of things. But intricate repairs, specialized repairs might require what? Specialists, like scuba equipment. Scuba equipment is a specialized, it's a specialized equipment. It needs intricate repairer. So you might need to take it somewhere to someone who's competent in this to fix it. Make sure that for every PPE that you've issued out to each and every user, make sure that for every PPE that you have issued out to each and every worker, there's a replacement for it. There's a spare one for it in case that one fails. Then there's something called CE marking. What is CE marking? CE marking basically, it's a claim by the manufacturer that tells us that this PPE has been tested against in a well-established standard, and it has been certified by an independent body. It meets all the safety and health and quality standards. So in other words, it's quality. It's of sound construction. You can trust it. What are the advantages of CE marking? It's a common standard, and this standard I must also make it known that it's a European standard. It's been developed. It's developed. What's developed in the EU, in the European Union, is widely used there. It's their standard, but it has become a common standard across the whole globe. Why? Because most manufacturing companies, most business in the world occurs between the European Union as a region and other regions, between America and Asia and Africa. So, being that we buy their cars, we sell to them from Africa, from China, from wherever, we have to kind of be familiar with this. It also encourages a use of diagrams and pictograms, which is an easier language to understand instead of using native languages like Chinese and Russian. Not so many people in the world speak Russian. It also provides a means of selling to all European Union member states without barriers to trade. Even if you were outside the country, you are outside the region, and you manufacture something or you want to sell something to the EU, and you use CE marking, you use this standard, it makes it easier for you to sell to the EU. And it also makes sure that information which is supplied is fairly standard, and it's also that information is also written down in common languages, or rather in most languages like English, or international languages, what are commonly known as international languages. What are the disadvantages? Instructional manuals that come with with some of these things, they can be very long, and it might be tiresome, it might be boring to spend so many hours reading an instructional manual. Sometimes you might find that if the instructional manual itself, it might come even in a foreign language that you as the buyer don't know, and then you have a language barrier, and you have these volumes that you have to read of instructional manuals, right? Translations of some of these manuals, because some companies and some suppliers, they try to translate. Sometimes these translations, especially this is very common with the Chinese. You find that the English that they translate their instructional manuals from Chinese, from Mandarin to English. The English is very distorted, and because of that distortion, the meaning of the instructions might be lost, and which makes it very difficult for the end user to be able to understand what it is that the manufacturer or the supplier is trying to say. And some manufacturers, they can be fraudulent and fake CE marking. Fake it. Design a phone and write CE marking and put some ISO standard there, claiming that it was tested while it wasn't. And also, some manufacturers might make mistakes in claiming conformity with safety laws. It happens. Companies can out of confusion can be there, and then they say no, we have met the standard, while they have not. All right. The limitations of PPE. PPE, like we said, it only protects the wearer and not the other workers. That means if you are 10 and maybe 2 of you are put on PPE, only the 2 are protected, the other 8 are not, because it protects the wearer. That's the most principal thing. The other limitations is that every hazard has a specific PPE. So if your workers are facing multiple hazards, you have a conundrum, you have a quandary of choosing and making sure that the PPE is compatible, which might not be always practical in every situation. So every specific hazard requires a specific PPE. It can restrict movement and dexterity. It may make it difficult for people to move. Even eyesight, the field of vision can be restricted. Communication can be more difficult. Even with the mask right now with COVID, every time you're speaking to someone, you have to say huh every time and then. Why? Because the mask is limiting the capability of their voice. And sometimes PPE, which is misunderstood or misused, can give the users a false sense of security. They can feel protected, thinking that I'm putting on a helmet, I'm protected. This is a helmet. This thing works. But while it's at the same time, they are not, or they have not put on the helmet in the right way, and when a hazard or an incident occurs, then they get injured, even though the PPE was there. And the other thing is that PPE must be maintained for it to be effective. Like that rubber thing, that respirator. You must remove that filter material and you must clean it from the inside and outside. Otherwise, the dirt will be trapped and you breathe it in. And when PPE can get that's the other thing. The PPE can get contaminated. When it gets contaminated, you must change it. And it can also, especially in Southeast Asia, where you have hot, humid conditions, PPE can cause the user to overheat. We have seen it with the Olympics right now, where you had humidity upwards of 88, over 80%, over 70% average humidity, and with temperatures over 30. That's too much. People can easily, which are putting on overalls and all these things, and you're working in a hot environment and it's humid, you can overheat and suffer from heat stroke or any one of those issues. So, and that's the reference that we're using. So thank you guys for listening. See you in the next lesson.